My name is Nora Thompson. Like most evenings since coming to Monte Carlo, I was sitting by myself in a little cafe on the outskirts of the busy casino square tonight. Although it's a long cry from the opulent lifestyle I was raised in, all I wanted was a simple break after graduating from a prestigious American institution. It feels like my dad controls half the world, from hotels to computer companies. To avoid the V and to keep things honest, I go by my mother's last name. He entered when the night was beginning to chill. Daniel appeared to be the owner, or at least believed he was. He pulled out the chair across from me without asking, stumbling over with a confidence that I suppose comes with wearing a suit that costs more than most people's rent. After seating down, he eventually said, "Mind if I sit?" He had a charming grin that had likely been studied. I said, "Looks like you're already sitting," without raising my gaze from my coffee. His laugh was a little too silky. "I'm Daniel, and you are." I exclaimed sharply, "Nora," and gave him a rapid checkup. Too polished, yet admittedly attractive, not my typical type. "So, Nora, what brings a girl like you to a pricey haunt like this all by yourself?" I wasn't sure if I was pleased or angered by the hint of teasing in his tone. "Just enjoying my coffee," was my evasive response. "What's your excuse?" I'd be lying if I said business. He looked at me steadily and said, "Let's just say I'm looking for something interesting tonight, and it looks like I might have found it." I arched an eyebrow. "Hope the coffee lives up to your expectations then." Daniel chuckled. "Something tells me it's already exceeded them." I had no intention of making pals. I'm definitely not seeking a casual relationship. Look, I'm not one of those girls who falls for lines, if that's what you're aiming for, and I'm certainly not interested in whatever game you're playing. He lowered his voice a little and said, "Who says I'm playing a game?" "Experience," was my response. "What do you expect when you sit down without being invited and form a line? A number on the phone? A date?" He appeared truly amused as he leaned back. "You're tough now. That's nice. Just a discussion, not a phone number. Say the word and I'll disappear, though if it's too much." I thought about him for a while. Despite its beauty, Monte Carlo was lonely. It might not harm to have a little conversation. Conversation is fine, but keep it light. We spoke for a long time. It was a fairly simple talk. I didn't provide any personal information, and he didn't ask for any. Despite my initial misgivings, I found that I was genuinely enjoying the conversation as the night became darker. Unlike other males, Daniel didn't try to impress me with his wealth or connections. His demeanor suggested that he was accustomed to nicer things, but that they did not define him. When the evening finally cooled off, it was time to leave. My words were, "Well, Daniel, this was unexpectedly pleasant," and I got up to go. His smile said, "Surprised yourself, huh?" "Just a little, perhaps. Daniel, good night." His remarks rang a little in my head as I made my way back to my flat. There were a lot of surprises in Monte Carlo, and maybe, just maybe, I had found one tonight. The nights in Monte Carlo were a little less lonely after that initial meeting with Daniel. Whether I was out exploring the local markets during the day or enjoying a late supper by myself, he had a way of showing up wherever I was. Unexpectedly, his perseverance was precisely the opposite of frustrating. Perhaps because he wasn't demanding. He simply appeared sincere in wanting to spend time with me. He came over with 2 coffees and sat down next to me without saying anything one windy evening while I was watching the sunset. Assuming I want coffee, I raised an eyebrow in teasing. He gave me a cup. "If I'm wrong, I'll drink both." I remarked, "Good guess," and took the coffee. The sound of the waves filled the calm moments as we sat in solitude for a while. Daniel finally broke the stillness by saying, "You never told me what you do back in the States." Didn't think it mattered, I declared with a shrug. "I'm employed. I'm really enjoying not working right now." "Fair enough," he said with a laugh. "Everyone's got a story, though, don't you think?" We settled into a simple pattern over the course of the following several days. I was shown areas of Monte Carlo by Daniel. I had yet to investigate. We discussed everything and nothing, including our favorite cuisines, movies, and literature. I was all for the classics, like Sean Connery, while he was adamantly supporting Daniel Craig as the greatest James Bond actor. We were walking on the beach one day when he abruptly stopped and gave me a serious look that I had never seen him give me before. "Nora, I know I'm just some guy you met at a cafe, but these past weeks have been, I don't know, different, better because of you." Unsure of how to react, I also halted. I had no intention of dealing with feelings here. "Daniel, I like hanging out with you." "I do, but this is just a break for me. I'm not looking for complications." He nodded slowly, taking a deep breath. "I get it. No pressure. Just know that I'm here, okay. And I think you're pretty amazing." Days turned into weeks, and my time in Monte Carlo was drawing to a close. Daniel and I spent more and more time together, and what started as casual walks and talks turned into late-night dinners and early morning breakfasts. It was the last thing I expected, falling for someone under the Mediterranean stars. Then one evening, he dropped a bombshell. "Come back with me, Nora. Work at my company in the States." I know it's sudden, but I don't know. I just think it could be great. The idea was crazy, completely insane, and yet part of me was tempted by the adventure, by the idea of taking this, whatever it was, and seeing where it could go. Moving back to the States felt like stepping into an alternate universe. Daniel's offer wasn't just a job, it was an invitation into his life. And suddenly, I was living in an ordinary apartment in an ordinary part of town, playing the role of an ordinary girl who'd lucked out. My father, however, had different ideas about ordinary. He showed up unannounced one afternoon, just as I was unpacking my last box. His booming laugh filled my small living room as he stood in the doorway, towering and larger than life. "Nora, hiding out in plain sight, huh?" He chuckled, giving me a big hug that almost crushed my ribs. "So tell me about this decision. This guy must be something special for you to up and move like this." His tone was light, but I could tell he was probing, doing his fatherly duty to sniff out any trouble. I sighed, sitting down on the couch. "His name's Daniel. He's different, Dad. He doesn't know about all this," I said, waving vaguely around, implying the wealth and the complicated strings that came with it. Dad sat down next to me, his expression serious now. "Nora, you know you can't keep that a secret forever. If he's going to be part of your life, he should know who you are." "I know, Dad. I want to be sure about him before I complicate things. Thanks for looking out for me, though." He ruffled my hair like he used to when I was a kid. "Always, kiddo. Just remember, if you need anything, I'm just a call away. And I've got eyes everywhere," he added with a wink. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of adjusting to my new job and new life. Daniel was a constant presence, supportive, and as charming as ever. But there was an edge to him now, a sort of sharpness that came with the responsibilities he carried. One night, over a quiet dinner at my place, Daniel brought up a topic I'd been dreading. "Nora, when do you think I'll get to meet your parents? I feel like I'm missing a big part of your life." I paused, the weight of the moment settling over me. "Well, my mom passed away a long time ago, and my dad's just a regular trucker. We're not exactly on speaking terms right now." Daniel frowned, a hint of concern crossing his face. I'm sorry to hear that. But whenever you're ready, I'd like to meet him. Family is important. I nodded, appreciating his sentiment, but knowing full well the reality of my father's world, a world I wasn't ready to introduce Daniel to just yet. Life with Daniel moved at a pace. I never expected we were already blending our lives together. My job at his company was going great, and we were getting deeper into our relationship. I guess it all seemed like we were gearing up for something big, but I was still taken aback when that big moment actually happened. It was a normal evening. We were at his place, a cozy, upscale apartment with views of the city skyline. We had just finished dinner, nothing fancy, just some takeout because neither of us felt like cooking. We were sitting on the couch, a documentary about ocean life playing in the background, the kind you watch but don't really watch. Daniel turned to me, his expression more serious than the situation called for. He took my hand, and suddenly I felt my heart start to race. Nora, I've been thinking about us, about everything we've been through, and everything I want for us in the future. I nodded, my mouth suddenly dry. Yeah, I love you, Nora. I love everything about you, and I don't want to imagine my life without you. He paused, and I could see him swallow hard, like he was nervous. That made two of us. I want to be with you always. Will you marry me? Just like that. No getting down on one knee. No ring box being opened. It was straightforward, genuine, and so very Daniel. Yes, I said, the word coming out in a rush, almost a relief. Yes, I will. He flashed that wide, infectious grin that had won me over from day one and hugged me tight. We spent the rest of the evening talking about our future, what we wanted, where we saw ourselves. It was exciting and a bit daunting, but it felt right. The next challenge came when I told my dad. I expected him to be happy, but his response was lukewarm at best. Nora, you know I want nothing but your happiness, but are you sure about this? It's all happening so fast, he said, his voice heavy with concern. I'm sure, Dad. He's a great guy, you'll see. I tried to sound more confident than I felt. He sighed. All right, but promise me you'll sign a prenuptial agreement, just to be safe. The word prenuptial didn't scare me. It was just another part of the modern marriage package, especially with someone who had as much to lose as I did, even if Daniel didn't know the full extent of it. Of course, Dad. We'll handle it, I assured him. That's good then. And Nora, I won't be at the wedding. I don't want to spoil your story about being a simple girl. Then came the introduction to Daniel's mother. Her reception was icy from the start. During dinner at their family home, she scrutinized me with a look that chilled the room. Daniel, are you sure about this girl? She doesn't seem like a fit for our family, she remarked bluntly. Daniel tried to smooth things over, but his mother was relentless. A prenuptial agreement is non-negotiable, she insisted. I agreed without hesitation, knowing it would ease some tension. Absolutely. I wouldn't have it any other way, I said, as we later formalized the terms with a lawyer present. Despite these hurdles, our wedding in the Maldives was breathtaking. Standing beside Daniel, with the ocean whispering behind us and the sand beneath our feet, I felt a surge of hope. It was just us, our love, and a future we were ready to shape together. Despite the rocky start with family expectations, married life started off better than I could have hoped. Daniel and I settled into our new house, a beautiful place with more space than we'd ever need. It was supposed to be the beginning of our perfect life together. I threw myself back into work, determined to prove that I was more than just the boss's wife. My role at the company had always been challenging, but now there was an added layer of expectations. I was not only managing projects, but was also part of key decision-making processes. Daniel seemed proud, at least initially. He would introduce me in meetings with a hint of pride in his voice. "This is Nora, my wife, and our project lead." However, as the months rolled on and the projects under my lead turned successful, bringing in significant profits and boosting the company's profile, something in Daniel shifted. It was subtle at first, a comment here, a slight remark there. One evening, as we sat down for dinner, he brought it up. "Nora, you're doing great at work." "Too great, maybe." I looked up from my plate, puzzled. "What do you mean, too great? Isn't that good for the company?" "It is," he admitted, pushing his food around on his plate. "But the guys are starting to say it's turning into the Nora show over there." His words stung a little. "Isn't that a bit unfair? I thought you'd be happy that we're doing well." "I am happy, but it's a lie. Everyone's always talking about you, about how you handle things. Makes me wonder." Where I stand, that conversation was the first of many. As the business grew, so did the strain between us. Daniel's once supportive demeanor was now tinged with resentment. I couldn't understand it. Wasn't he the one who had encouraged me to step up in the first place? Things got worse when his mother came to stay with us for a few weeks. Her presence in the house brought an old-world traditional attitude that I had always managed to avoid. She would make offhand comments about my work, about how a wife should be more present at home. "You're always at the office, Nora. When do you have time to take care of your husband?" she would say. I tried to shrug it off to keep the peace, but her words only deepened the growing rift between Daniel and me. It seemed no amount of success at work could compensate for what was slowly unraveling at home. The more I achieved, the more our marriage suffered. One evening, Daniel came home from work, his face set in a grim line. "Nora, I think it's best if you leave the company. We need to focus on our family, and it seems like your role there is just causing too much tension." "Leave the company? But why? I've been contributing so much." My voice was a mix of disbelief and anger. "It's for the best. You can focus on the house, maybe start that garden you've always talked about." His tone was dismissive, as if he were deciding on something trivial, not my career. The next day, I found out he had let go of all our house staff, housekeepers, cooks, gardeners. It was all on me now. "You wanted to be more involved at home. Here's your chance," he said, almost coldly. I wasn't scared of housework, but the way this was thrown at me felt wrong. This wasn't the loving, caring man I married. This was someone else, someone very intolerant and controlling. His mother, staying with us at the time, seemed to relish the situation. "It's good for a wife to focus on her home," she would say, smirking slightly whenever Daniel talked about my new role as a full-time housewife. As I adjusted to this unexpected turn in my life, I couldn't help but feel ashamed. Ashamed that I hadn't seen this coming. Ashamed to admit to my father that maybe he was right about Daniel. When Daniel suggested a trip to Monte Carlo to maybe rekindle what was left of our spark, I was hesitant but hopeful. That hope died quickly when his mother announced she'd join us. "It's been ages since I've traveled," she declared loudly, as if it were a decree that couldn't be opposed. Daniel, of course, welcomed her with open arms, not once considering what I might think. We rented a small house in Monte Carlo, which was charming but costly, and it quickly became my prison rather than a retreat. From the start, Daniel and his mother treated the city as their playground. They rented luxurious cars, visited exclusive boutiques, and dined at the finest restaurants, while I was left to manage the household. They demanded home-cooked meals, turning me into nothing more than a servant in a holiday home, cooking and cleaning after them as they gallivanted around the city. As days passed, Daniel's mother's digs grew sharper, her tone more venomous. Really, Nora, living at someone else's expense must be quite the life, huh? She'd sneer, her words a slap disguised in a smirk. Daniel never defended me. Instead, he laughed. His laughter was a betrayal, each time echoing around the cold walls of our temporary home. I felt isolated, the city sparkle muted by the shadow of their disdain. One evening, we passed a grand old-style hotel. Its facade was a reminder of a world of elegance and respect. Daniel's mother, her voice dripping with envy, remarked, "Lucky billionaire Harris. Imagine owning such a hotel, ruling over a palace like that." That night at a restaurant overlooking the sea, the last vestige of my patience crumbled as we sat down. She waved the waiter over with an imperious flick of her wrist. "For Nora, the cheapest dish will do. No need to spoil her with extravagances she doesn't deserve," she declared loudly enough for nearby tables to hear. Daniel's response was a chuckle. His agreement came not just from his mouth, but from the dismissive flip of his hand. "Good call, Mom. Let's not go overboard." Humiliation washed over me like the waves crashing on the rocks below us. Rising from my chair, the clatter of my seat echoed my turmoil. I faced them both, my voice steady, louder than I intended. "I will not tolerate this any longer," I declared, my hands trembling but my resolve firm. "I am divorcing you, Daniel." The cold air of Monte Carlo was nothing compared to the chill of betrayal as I walked away from the restaurant. Daniel and his mother, rather than coming to apologize, followed me out with insults. As I quickened my pace, my mother-in-law's voice rang out, sharp and clear. "Just look at her, a beggar unworthy of my son." My heart raced, but before I could get far, Daniel caught up and grabbed my purse from my shoulder, his fingers clenching it tightly. "This is my money, Nora. Go on, get out on all fours if you have to." His voice was laced with contempt as he yanked the purse away, leaving me stunned on the sidewalk. Beside him, his mother laughed cruelly, her eyes gleaming with malice. "Maybe now you'll learn to beg in Monte Carlo, since that's all you're good for." Their laughter echoed down the street as I stood there, wall-less and alone. But as they hurled their final insults, fate stepped in. We were near that grand old hotel, the one Daniel's mother had earlier invited aloud, wishing she could own such a place. Pointing to the hotel, she sneered, "Maybe they'll let you in as a beggar." At that moment, the gates of the hotel opened, and a guard appeared. He saw me, recognition lighting up his face. "Miss Harris," he called out warmly, walking over with a respectful salute. The moment he said my name, the atmosphere shifted. Daniel and his mother paused, their expressions turning from satisfaction to confusion. The guard smiled broadly. "Your father told us you might come by. Please, this way. The best room is always reserved for you." As for Mr. Harris' instructions, Daniel's mother's face paled, her earlier words turning to ash in her mouth. "Harris, as in the billionaire Harris." She stammered, her earlier bravado crumbling. Ignoring them both, I walked towards the guard, my posture straightening. "Thank you, Pierre," I said, my voice calm and collected. Inside, I felt a mix of relief and vindication. Behind me, Daniel's pleas began. "Nora, please." I didn't mean. His mother, not to be outdone, shouted past her son. "Perhaps we could come in for a drink, at least?" I didn't look back. Entering the hotel, the doors closing behind me felt symbolic, shutting out the chaos of my old life. Pierre escorted me to the reception, where staff greeted me with the deference due to the daughter of their employer. The flight back to the United States was a long one, giving me plenty of time to ponder over my next steps. By the time I landed, my resolve had hardened like the city sidewalks, ready to be trodden upon, but unyielding to the pressure. The following day, I found myself in the office of a reputable lawyer, papers spread out before me like a battle map. During your tenure at the company, it appears your husband failed to pay you bonuses owed for the multi-million-dollar deals you closed, the lawyer pointed out, his tone a mix of surprise and indignation. I groaned, my thoughts running over the innumerable hours I had dedicated to the business and the success I had fueled. That sounds about right, I said. We're suing for $3 million. Daniel stood there, stumbling through his defense, and the courtroom was cold and antiseptic, a sharp contrast to the angry glares he sent across the room. The man I used to adore appeared to be incredibly pitiful. Daniel's face fell as the decision was delivered, a landslide triumph that gave me $3 million. He made one final plea outside the courthouse. Everyone is making fun of me, Nora. I made a mistake. Can we begin again? Once his comments might have made me cry, but that moment was over. Daniel, all you miss is the money. Perhaps pay less attention to your mother the next time, I urged, my voice piercing the clear air. That chapter ended with the sound of my heels hitting the pavement as I turned and left. I went back home and confronted my father. Until I broke the quiet, there were many unspoken statements in the air between us. Dad, I should have listened to you. Warm and forgiving, he encircled me in his embrace. You have to figure things out for yourself. You know now. And half the fight is already won. We discussed life, errors, and fresh starts far into the night. His counsel served as a lighthouse for me as I made my way through my future-focused thinking. Motivated by our discussion, I started preparing for my next project. In addition to sharpening my abilities, working at Daniel's firm stoked an uncontrollable enthusiasm for the field. I made the decision to start my own investing company. I had the means to begin something significant, something that was mine, thanks to my experience and the hefty payment. As I started my business from scratch, weeks stretched into months. Even if the obstacles were overwhelming, I learned from each failure. Each accomplishment served as a reminder that I was headed in the right direction. I realized how far I'd gone from being a disillusioned wife in a loveless marriage to a capable company owner as I sat in my new office and looked out over the busy streets below. Although there had been many obstacles along the way, each one had strengthened me.